Shoo shoo, tell you story time.
Once upon a time, nestled deep in the heart of a great forest, lived a poor woodcutter with his two children, Hansel and Gretel, and their stepmother. A terrible famine swept across the land, and one night the woodcutter lay awake, tossing and turning with worry. He confided in his wife, "What will become of us? We have nothing left to eat." His wife, whose heart was as cold as stone, replied, "Listen to me. Tomorrow morning we will take the children deep into the forest, give them each a piece of bread, and leave them there. They will not find their way home again, and we shall be rid of them." The woodcutter was horrified, but his wife argued until he reluctantly agreed. Hansel and Gretel, however, were not asleep. They had heard everything. Gretel began to cry, but Hansel comforted her. "Don't worry, little sister. I have a plan." When the adults were asleep, Hansel crept outside. The moon was shining brightly, and the white pebbles on the ground glittered like silver coins. He filled his pockets with as many as he could carry and tiptoed back to bed. At the crack of dawn, the stepmother woke the children. "Get up, you lazy things. We are going into the forest to gather wood." She gave them each a tiny piece of bread for their lunch. As they walked, Hansel stopped every few steps and dropped a shiny white pebble on the path. His father asked what he was looking at, and Hansel replied, "I'm looking at my little white cat sitting on the roof to bid me farewell." Of course, it wasn't a cat. It was a pebble reflecting the sunlight. Deep in the forest, the stepmother said, "Rest here, children. We will go and cut wood and come back for you." Hansel and Gretel waited and waited, but their parents never returned. When night fell, Gretel began to cry again. But Hansel reassured her, "Wait until the moon rises, and we will find our way." And so they did. The moonlight made the pebbles shine, and they followed the trail all the way back to their cottage. Their father was overjoyed to see them, but the stepmother was furious. Not long after, the famine was worse than ever. Once again, the stepmother convinced the woodcutter to abandon the children. This time, Hansel couldn't collect pebbles because the door was locked. The next morning, on their way into the forest, Hansel crumbled his small piece of bread and dropped the crumbs along the path. But when they tried to follow the trail of crumbs home that night, they found nothing. The birds of the forest had eaten every last one. The children were truly lost. They wandered for 3 days, growing hungrier and more tired with each step. On the third day, a beautiful snow-white bird appeared, singing so sweetly that they followed it. The bird led them to a small clearing, and there stood the most amazing cottage they had ever seen. It was made of gingerbread, with a roof of cake and windows of clear sugar. "Let's have a feast," cried Hansel, and he broke off a piece of the roof, while Gretel nibbled on a windowsill. Suddenly, a soft voice called from inside, "Nibble, nibble, little mouse, who is nibbling at my house?" The children replied, the wind, the heavenly wind," and continued to eat. Then the door opened, and a very old woman, leaning on a crutch, hobbled out. Hansel and Gretel were so frightened they dropped their food. But the old woman smiled sweetly. "Oh, you dear children, come inside with me. No harm will come to you." She led them in and gave them a delicious meal of pancakes with sugar, apples, and nuts. But the kind old woman was actually a wicked witch who lured children to her cottage to eat them. The next morning, she grabbed Hansel and locked him in a small cage. She then forced Gretel to cook fattening meals for her brother. Every day, the witch, whose eyesight was poor, would say, "Hansel, stick out your finger so I can feel if you are fat enough." But clever Hansel would stick out a small bone instead, and the witch, thinking he was still too thin, grew impatient. One day she could wait no longer. "Gretel," she screeched, "light the oven. We'll have a feast today." She told Gretel to climb inside the oven to see if it was hot enough. But Gretel, sensing the trap, said, "I don't know how. Could you show me?" The witch grumbled, "Silly goose," and stuck her own head into the oven. In a flash, Gretel gave her a mighty shove, sending her tumbling inside, and slammed the iron door shut. Gretel freed Hansel from his cage, and they hugged with joy. They explored the witch's house and found chests filled with pearls and precious stones. They filled their pockets and set off to find their way home. After walking for a few hours, they came to a large river. A white duck swam by, and they asked it for help. The kind duck carried them across, one by one. Soon, the forest began to look familiar, and in the distance they saw their father's cottage. They ran as fast as they could and burst through the door. Their father wept with joy. He told them their stepmother had passed away and that he had not had a single happy moment since they left. Hansel and Gretel emptied their pockets, and the pearls and gems scattered across the floor. Their troubles were finally over, and they all lived together in happiness for the rest of their days. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to share, and subscribe for more classic fairy tales. See you next time.